Have you ever stopped chasing something you deeply wanted just because you were afraid to fail? Point fives. Maybe it was a career dream, a creative idea, a conversation that could have changed everything. But the fear crept in. What if I mess up? What will people think? What if I'm not enough? That fear isn't just a passing emotion. It becomes weight, invisible but heavy. It sits on our shoulders, presses on our chest, and whispers, "Play small, stay safe." But here's the truth. Fear of failure doesn't make you weak, it makes you human. And even more important, it's a story you can rewrite. Because the greatest tragedy isn't failure itself, it's the life unlived because of it. Jim Rohn once said, "If you are not willing to risk the unusual, you will have to settle for the ordinary." Let that settle in. Not risking the unusual isn't just about safety, it's about settling, shrinking, choosing regret over growth. Today, we go deeper, not just to act differently, but to think differently. Because once you change the way you look at failure, failure itself begins to change. We'll explore why this fear shows up so often, how Jim Rohn transformed it into fuel, and what practical steps you can take today to finally move forward with courage. This is not about being fearless. It's about fear mastery. It's about becoming the kind of person who acts even with trembling hands. And maybe, just maybe, that first small step is the one that changes everything. Let's begin. Let me ask you something. Have you ever had an idea, a powerful, exciting idea, and then watched it quietly die because you didn't follow through? Not because it wasn't worth it, not because you weren't capable, but because you were afraid to fail. If that feels familiar, you're not alone. This is the silent struggle of millions. Dreamers, creators, professionals, young adults trying to find their place. They have vision, but no movement. Potential, but no momentum. Because somewhere deep inside, fear is calling the shots. Let's name the fear. It's not just about failing a test, or losing money, or messing up a project. The fear of failure is deeper, more personal. It's the fear of being judged, of being labeled not good enough, of trying and proving your inner critic right. This fear isn't always loud. Sometimes it disguises itself. It shows up as procrastination, as overthinking, as "I'll do it when I'm more prepared." But behind the delay is doubt. Behind the planning is panic. So why does this fear dominate us? Why, in an age of opportunity, are so many stuck in hesitation? Let's break it down. First, we're raised in systems that reward perfection. From school grades to social media likes, we're taught that mistakes are bad, that falling means failure, that being vulnerable means weakness. But Jim Rohn would say, mistakes are part of the dues one pays for a full life. And yet, most of us learn to fear them. We internalize the idea that getting it wrong is worse than not trying at all. So we hold back, we stay safe, we choose comfort over courage. Second, we attach our identity to outcomes. We don't just fail a test. We say, "I'm a failure." We don't just miss a goal. We think, "Maybe I'm not cut out for this." But failure is not an identity, it's feedback. Jim Rohn reminded us, don't take failure personally, take it as a signal. Still, that's hard to do when your self-worth is tied to your results. We're taught to prove our value, to earn approval, to be seen as successful. So when we imagine failing, we don't just fear the event, we fear what it might say about us. Third, we carry the weight of our past. Maybe someone once laughed at you, dismissed your dream, told you not to try. Those wounds linger. And every time we consider something bold, that old tape plays. Remember what happened last time? Don't risk it again. Fear then becomes a defense mechanism. It tries to keep us safe, not realizing it's keeping us stuck. And here's the kicker. Most of us don't even realize this is happening. We call it being responsible, being cautious, waiting for the right time. But what we're really doing is avoiding pain, avoiding risk, avoiding growth, avoiding the mirror. Jim Rohn put it bluntly, we must all suffer one of two pains, the pain of discipline or the pain of regret. And fear? It always chooses regret, because discipline requires you to act in the face of fear, to move even when it's hard. So here we are, a generation with more tools than ever before, but paralyzed by the same old story. What if I fail? What if they judge me? What if I'm not ready? Let me flip the question. What if you don't try? What if you never speak up? What if you live the next 5 years in the same hesitation? Because here's a harder truth. Avoiding failure doesn't keep you safe. It keeps you small. Fear of failure is not the enemy. Letting it run your life is. You see, fear isn't the problem. It's who we become when we obey it. Jim Rohn would challenge us to ask, what belief is silently shaping your life? Because if you don't question it, you live it. And most people are living in a belief that says, unless it's guaranteed to work, I shouldn't try. But nothing meaningful comes with guarantees. Growth isn't safe. Success isn't safe. Becoming isn't safe. But all of it is worth it. So now we've named the fear. We've seen its roots. We've witnessed its disguises. In the next section, we shift from understanding fear to reframing it, from letting it define us to letting it develop us, from running from it to rising through it. Let's continue. Jim Rohn once said, "Don't take failure personally, take it as a signal." And with that one sentence, he reframed what most of us fear the most: failure, mistake, embarrassment. Let's be honest. Fear of failure isn't just some vague emotion. It's visceral. It stops dreams in their tracks. It silences voices. It rewrites identities. But Jim had a different lens. He didn't see fear as a wall. He saw it as a mirror. 1. Embrace failure as feedback. To Jim, failure was not a definition of who you are. It was information, a reflection, a signal, a course correction. He taught, failure is not a person, it's an event. It's not permanent. It's not a label. It's just a part of the process. Think of it like this. When a rocket veers off course, it doesn't stop the mission. It adjusts. Failure, when embraced, helps you adjust. Jim would say, if you learn from it, you didn't fail. You paid tuition. Every successful person has failed. Not once, not twice, but often. What separates them isn't that they avoid failure. It's that they don't take it personally. They take it professionally. They ask, what went wrong? What can I change? What did I miss? Failure then becomes the most honest teacher you'll ever meet. And Jim's wisdom, treat it with respect. 2. Reclaim responsibility. Jim Rohn believed in radical ownership. He often reminded his audiences, you cannot change the seasons, but you can change yourself. Too often, fear of failure is tied to blame. We blame the economy, the timing, our parents, the algorithm. But when we blame, we give away our power. Jim said, take full responsibility for your own life. Accept your own mistakes. Refine your philosophy. Ownership is where transformation begins. Think of responsibility like a steering wheel. When you hold it, you may still hit bumps, but at least you're driving. Fear shrinks when you shift from victim to driver. Jim didn't teach blame, he taught reflection. He didn't teach guilt, he taught growth. Because owning your choices means owning your power to choose again. And that's the essence of self-leadership. 3. Turn fear into fuel. Perhaps the most radical shift Jim offered was this: fear is not your enemy. It is energy, unused, misunderstood, waiting for direction. He taught that you don't need to be fearless to act. You need to act while afraid. Jim once joked, motivation alone is not enough. If you have an idiot and you motivate him, now you have a motivated idiot. His point, emotion without direction is chaos. But fear, when guided by clarity and values, becomes drive. Think of fear like fire. Left uncontrolled, it burns. But harnessed, it warms homes, it fuels engines, it propels rockets. So how do you turn fear into fuel? You begin by doing the thing you fear most, in the smallest way possible. Afraid to speak up? Start by writing. Afraid to launch? Start by planning. Afraid to fail? Start by redefining failure. Because every time you act despite fear, you send a message to your brain, this doesn't control me anymore. And that's when fear becomes fire. That's when doubt becomes drive. And that's when the future begins to open. Closing reflection. Jim Rohn didn't eliminate fear from his life. He just learned how to reframe it as feedback, as fuel, as the path to becoming more. So the next time fear visits you, don't run, greet it. Ask it what it wants you to know, then thank it, and get moving. Because the secret to overcoming fear of failure is not to wait for it to vanish, but to walk with it until it changes shape into strength. Understanding fear is the beginning. Reframing it gives you strength. But living above it, that takes practice. Jim Rohn often said, "Success is nothing more than a few simple disciplines practiced every day." Overcoming fear of failure isn't about making one heroic leap. It's about daily steps, intentional actions, small shifts that rewire how you respond. So here are 3 simple but powerful practices. Do them daily, let them grow with you, and watch what happens to your fear. Practice 1. Name the fear. Point 5. Fear thrives in ambiguity. It grows when we avoid naming it. It multiplies when we pretend it isn't there. But here's the truth. You cannot master what you refuse to face. Jim would say, the beginning of change is awareness. So the first practice is simple. Write it down. Point 5s. Open a journal or even a blank note on your phone and finish this sentence. I'm afraid that if I fail, then... Let your answer come out raw. Don't filter. Don't polish. Just write. You might find things like, people will laugh. I'll prove my parents right. I'll lose time. I'll disappoint myself. Now, for each answer, ask this. Is this fear true, or is it just a story I've believed? This one reflection can change everything, because when you name the fear, you disarm it. Fear has power in the shadows, but when it's on paper, it's just ink, and you get to choose what story you write next. Practice 2. Break it down. One of the reasons fear paralyzes us is this. The dream feels too big, too far, too complicated. Jim Rohn called this the paralysis of overwhelm. And his antidote? Don't major in minor things, but also don't let the major things intimidate you. Here's the practice. Take one goal or vision that scares you. Now write it down at the top of a page. Underneath, ask, what's one small action I can take today that moves me closer to this? Point 5. That's it. Break the mountain into stones, then step on one. Let's say your goal is start a business. You're afraid of failure. Break it down. Step 1, read one article about your industry. Step 2, write a list of 3 business ideas. Step 3, reach out to one person doing what you want to do. Each step shrinks the fear because your brain sees progress, and progress is the antidote to paralysis. Fear lives in stagnation, but fear flees from momentum. Practice 3, celebrate progress, not perfection. Let me ask you, when was the last time you acknowledged yourself? Not for getting it all right, not for being perfect, but simply for showing up. Jim taught, learn to celebrate your own small victories. And here's why it matters. Your brain responds to patterns. If you only reward perfection, you train your brain to fear mistakes. But if you reward effort, you train it to associate action with pride. So the third practice is this. At the end of each day, write down one small win. It could be, I emailed that person I was nervous about. I filmed the video even though I doubted myself. I said no when I usually say yes. You can do this in a journal, on sticky notes, or in a jar labeled wins. One by one, these tiny affirmations reshape your story. You move from, I always mess up, to I am someone who moves forward even through fear, and that's who you really are. Final thoughts. Fear of failure is not something you eliminate, it's something you train yourself to move through. And how you train is how you transform. So try this. Name your fear, break it down, celebrate progress. You don't have to be fearless, you just have to be consistent. And with these practices, fear will stop being a wall, it will become a doorway. Let me take you back to that quiet moment of hesitation, that breath you hold before you try, that space between idea and action, that fragile second when you ask yourself, what if I fail? We all know that moment. It comes before the job interview, before the confession, before the launch, before the leap. It whispers, "What if you fall?" But today, let's flip the script. Let's ask a different question. What if I fly? Jim Rohn didn't build his legacy by avoiding that moment. He built it by facing it, by walking through it, by using fear not as a stop sign, but as a signal. Because here's the truth. Fear doesn't disappear when you succeed. It disappears when you stop giving it authority. And that's the invitation in front of you now, to no longer wait until you feel ready, but to act because it matters. Let's remember what we've uncovered together. Fear is normal. It shows you care. But fear isn't the boss. You are. Failure is not a verdict. It's a signal, a teacher, a step on the way to mastery. Responsibility isn't blame. It's power. And small daily disciplines, they change your entire future. You are not here to live in the shadow of your fears. You are here to outgrow them, to outlearn them, to outlive them. Jim said, "The ultimate reason for setting goals is to entice you to become the person it takes to achieve them." In other words, the goal isn't the goal. You are. Your growth, your boldness, your wisdom. So what does a life beyond fear look like? It doesn't mean you never doubt. It means you don't bow to doubt. It doesn't mean you never fail. It means you rise stronger every time you fall. It doesn't mean you're always brave. It means you're always becoming. Jim Rohn's life wasn't one of perfection. It was one of progress, of principle, of pursuit. And now, it's your turn. What will you do with what you've heard? Will you tuck it away and return to comfort? Or will you take just one step forward? A step that says, "I choose growth over fear." Because that's where change begins. That's where fear loses its grip. That's where your life expands. So today, I invite you to write your new story. One where fear is a visitor, not a villain. One where setbacks are lessons, not limitations. One where your dreams speak louder than your doubts. Look back at everything you've survived, everything you've learned, everything you've overcome just to be here right now. That is not weakness. That is proof. Proof that you're capable of more than you think. Proof that fear can show up, but it doesn't get to drive. So here's your call to action. Stand up, speak up, start. Not with perfect confidence, but with present courage. And whenever you forget, come back to Jim Rohn, to his voice, to his lessons, to his quiet belief that ordinary people can live extraordinary lives when they refuse to be ruled by fear. So let that be your choice today. Write it in the comments. I choose growth over fear. And then go prove it with your next step, your next yes, your next risk. Because your life beyond fear, it starts now, and it starts with you.